if you think back to, your own life, your teenage years, you think about who you were at 12 years old, and then you think about who you are at 18 years old. They are two drastically different people.
Yeah, different animals altogether.
Whereas, who you are, say, at 22 and 28, there's significant differences, but a range of difference is nowhere close.
No, yeah, right.
And so they're going through so much. And so it is vital at that point that they begin to grasp some of the depths of who Jesus is and who God is. And, it's the old saying that has been in youth ministry forever. It's this idea that their faith has to become their own, and that's the time it happens.
Welcome to episode 1 of The Good News Show, a ministry of the Bellevue Church, where we explore the power of the gospel in the lives of real people. I'm Greg Falls, and in today's episode, I interview Kyle Watkins, our student pastor here at church. And we talk about the importance of reaching the next generation for Christ. We talk about the essential role of the church in the lives of teenagers in those middle school and high school years. And we talk about the important decisions that parents need to make in order to help their kids grow in their faith in Christ. Enjoy the show. Kyle, welcome to the Good News Show. I've been looking forward to this. You are the student pastor here at Bellevue and have been for almost 6 years. You minister to our middle school and high school youth, and but really you've had a relationship with Bellevue for a lot longer than that. About 17 years ago, you were the interim between two other youth pastors that we had here years ago. You remember anything about that?
Yeah. One of my mentors in ministry is Morgan Owen. He was youth pastor here for 8 years, I believe. And so I had interned for Morgan for a couple of summers. One of several on staff that have been interns for Morgan. And so at the conclusion of that internship, I went back to school, graduated, finished up, moved to Owensboro for my first job. And in the process of having that job, Morgan announced he was leaving to head down to UT Martin. And he approached me to see if I would have any interest in possibly being an interim. Right. And, of course, then I met with you and Angus, and we discussed it, and that was back in 2003. Wow. And I served as the interim for 4 or 5 months there at the end of the year. And it was right before Teray Jasper started, and so it was a fun time. There was occasionally I'll see students. There were students then that are now adults, and I realized that you all were crazy to let such a young guy lead the youth at that time, because it just doesn't seem right. There's former students who are in their 30s who have kids, and but yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember it being a fun time. It was intimidating because it was such a big church, and even though I knew the church and had been with them, I wanted to do a good job. Sure. And I remember the students in the ministry at that time. They were leaders. They were good, solid
we had a good group,
believers, and they wanted to do stuff. And they just really embraced Becky and me. We'd only been married for less than a year when we were here, and so it was a great time. It was a really exciting time.
23 at the time, or 20?
Gosh, yeah.
20,
yeah, we
23
were.
Or 24.
Yeah. So it was awesome. I mean, we saw a lot of cool stuff happen. That was about the same time that the church was doing 40 Days of Purpose.
Oh yeah,
and we did the purpose-driven groups, and
that's right.
So we actually had some for the students, and we were leading those, and we were, 100 kids coming on a Wednesday night to be in these groups, and it was a really fun time. I really enjoyed the time there.
I had forgotten that was the same time that you were an interim. I very much remember those days and organizing, starting new things, spinning out new groups. It was that was what is it about that time that you remember that either impressed you, or what was it about Bellevue that you learned from? Or, you know, I know, and I'm leading into this because I know that you're somebody who the Bellevue experience marked you.
Yeah.
And played a role too in you actually wanting to come and apply to be our student pastor 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's I started the story there with the internship, but my relationship with Bellevue actually started a little bit earlier. When I was in college, that was where I started getting serious about my faith. I'd been a Christian since I was 12, but really started to care about Jesus and about my relationship with him long about my freshman, sophomore year of college at UK. And my sister, Karen Feldhouse now, she was a member at Bellevue. She had started attending, was part of the singles ministry at the time, and she encouraged me when I would come home from school to come to Bellevue. And I'd grown up at Yellow Creek Baptist Church, love Yellow Creek, but I was like, you know, I'll go to this cool church with my sister. They were doing you know, the music was a big part. It was, you know, I was like, they're going to sing songs that I've actually heard, that I'm familiar with. And
and our church at that time was had been for a few years, had been really was at the cutting edge of some change, predominantly when it came to worship music and styles and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And
so she had me, you know, she would invite me to come to church. And so I came to Bellevue really anytime I came in from college, from my sophomore year through the second senior year that I had, I would come to Bellevue. And so it just, in general, I've always kind of seen Bellevue as a church that was, you know, that loved the community and cared about the community, but even more than that, wanted to do big things. Like, and I don't mean big events, but I mean wanted to see God do big stuff. And so that was always, even before I felt a call to ministry, that was an attractive thing to me. I wanted to be a part of that. And so I would attend with my sister through the internships, seeing some of the things that were happening with the church, and you know, it was fast paced, it was exciting, you know, and I'd get to go to staff meetings when I was an interim, and get to be around just some great godly men and women who are talking about their ministries, and you know, all the stuff's going on, and I'm trying my best to soak it all in, but it was like trying to drink out of a hydrant. It was a lot. I wouldn't even say a hose; it was a hydrant.
I remember sometimes your eyes were like wide open. Oh
goodness gracious! But you know, it stuck with me, and you know, I think a big part of it, ministry wise, I remember I interned for 2 summers. At the conclusion of my first summer, I was exhausted. I was frustrated. I'd spent all summer with freshman boys, and as awesome as that sounds, they wore me out. And at the end of the summer, I'll never forget, Morgan had a final night for the interns. And Alicia Berry, who you've interviewed through this, she and I interned together. Yeah. And so Morgan brought us all down front in the sanctuary at the old building, and the students would clap for us and everything. And I'll never forget.
First Sunday in August.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I walk out in the aisle to go up to the front. I was behind the freshman boys because you always had to sit near them to make sure they didn't cause problems. And so I walk out in the aisle to walk up, and one of the guys who had just been really just a button pusher all summer long, he turns to me, he puts his hands on my shoulders, and he said, "You have no idea the impact you've had on my life this summer. Thank you so much."
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't shake that thought for years. I still think of it. That was one of the first things I think that God used to help me see, a potential call to youth ministry, but also, it was these kids, it was this church, it was these people. And so, I even remember mentioning this in my interview 6 years ago that, I've served in several churches. I mean, Bellevue wasn't the church I grew up in as a kid, but Bellevue's the one church I have prayed for 20 years now.
Yeah,
and praying for specific people, and then praying for specific students and kids, praying for, Teray when she was here, praying for Jared when he was here, praying for Shane, and, so it's been, and praying for you. I've prayed for you as well. So, that's been a big part of it. I don't know if there was a connection for me with Bellevue that was there early on, and it stuck. And even when I wasn't here, I still felt like I was here. And so, so that's I guess what I would tell you is that there's just always been this connection. Part of it I could explain, and part of it I couldn't. I felt like God had kind of put Bellevue on my heart early on, and had kept Bellevue there. So,
well, you've been in youth ministry then, I guess, about 2 decades. Yeah.
Yep.
What are some of your favorite things about investing in middle school and high school kids?
Yeah. It's a really good question, because there's, the hard part. It's actually funny, because I've become the old guy in youth ministry now. I'm not the kid anymore. I'm not new at this. I go to a conference, and I'm one of the guys that's in the old man group. And but they're honestly, it's not unfair to say that there are a lot of things with student ministry that can be exhausting and frustrating, and all the things I said prior about the freshman boys. There are a lot of things that take your attention, a lot of things that take your time. And so the things that God gives you and allows you to see in student ministry that warm your heart take on a much bigger purpose than they might for anybody who's not in youth ministry. Right. Some of these things I would say may not just jump off the page for somebody else, but for me, it's simple things. Hearing a student come and tell me about sharing their faith with a friend. Not that their friend came to know Christ, but that they were bold enough to follow through and share their faith with a friend. That gets me going. That gets me up in the mornings. Students who I see, and one of the unique things of youth ministry is that you have them for however many years they're in youth. If they stay at the church, or they've been at the church the whole time, you get them 7 years. And then they're going to move off to college, or they're going to move into the workplace, whatever they're doing. And it's seeing and it's hard for me. I'm an instant gratification guy. So when I have to wait to see that 6th grade kid that just drives you nuts, you got to wait until they're in college, and all of a sudden, they're loving Jesus, and they've met a girl that loves Jesus, and they're going to have a healthy marriage. And I've been blessed to have a lot of former students who've gone into ministry, which is a huge blessing as well.
Absolutely.
There's, ultimately, though, I say it this way, it is absolutely 100% a calling. Because there are days, and I know I've heard you share this from the pulpit, there are days where, you wish you could be doing anything else.
You want to quit,
But it seems like when those days come, God gives you just enough. Whether it's a really cool experience at a campfire where the kids are starting to get it, and you see the light switch go on, or if it's students sitting around talking on a camp trip and talking about things that matter. God will give you just a little bit with it, and He's done that with me over the years a lot, because there's 20 years there have been a lot of difficult days, but
sure, absolutely.
But there's been so much blessing, just so much blessing in it.
Yeah. Well, what is it about the middle school and the high school years that makes church, youth ministry, student ministry so essential? You have anywhere between, I guess, about age 12 and age 18. I guess you might have a few 11-year-olds that enter into 6th grade for a while, before they turn 12. But those years, slightly preteen and then the teen years, most of us recognize that that's a critical time. But why? What is it about those years that makes what you do and what we do as a church so essential?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things. And it's kind of what separates it from children's ministry, because some of this there's overlap, but there's a difference. It's the change that they experience, physically, emotionally, mentally, everything. But there is, if you think back to your own life, your teenage years, you think about who you were at 12 years old, and then you think about who you are at 18 years old. They are two drastically different people.
Yeah, different animals altogether.
Whereas, who you are, say, at 22 and 28, there's significant differences, but a range of difference is nowhere close.
No, yeah, right.
And so they're going through so much. And so it is vital at that point that they begin to grasp some of the depths of who Jesus is and who God is. And it's the old saying that has been in youth ministry forever. It's this idea that their faith has to become their own, and that's the time it happens. For a lot of students who don't grasp faith before they get to college, it becomes much more challenging to all of a sudden create good patterns in your life and good habits in your life, in your walk with Christ, because you have spent so many years of development where that didn't happen. And then all of a sudden now you're supposed to turn it on. Well, spiritually it's tough to do that. Now it happens.
Yeah.
It happened for me, but there's difficulty there that if they can get in front of it, it sets them on a great path to be able to walk with Christ for the rest of their life.
That seems to lead us to realize as well how important it is for a parent to make certain that they have their kids in youth ministry during that time. You and I both we've talked about it before, we talk about it in staff meetings sometimes, how frustrating it is when we'll see parents who will face those 7 years with their kids. And of course, there's so much pressure on parents to do this sport and that sport. The schools are saying all these extracurricular activities, and plus there's parents sometimes have their own hobbies and interests outside the church.
Sure.
And those things can eat up a schedule just uber fast.
Right.
And we can watch people put the church down the list of priorities, and the children miss the impact, that continuous impact of faith, the most important thing that can happen in their life. And they will miss that faith conditioning for 7 years. And even if they're in and out once in a while, or they're there for seasons, the lack of consistency communicates to that kid. And when they become an adult, often they'll repeat the same patterns. And maybe worse.
And I think a big part of it too, and I mean, this is one of the blessings of doing youth ministry for so long now. I've seen it cycle through, and I've seen, 20 years ago, if you wanted to have an event to get students to come, you just order pizza. Order pizza and students are going to come, or tell them you're going to go play laser tag and they'll get excited about it. It's changed, but one of the biggest changes I've seen in teen culture is that everything, and it's the reality they're in, everything is amplified. So my life what I mean is, like, my life as a teenager, there were things that I felt were important. There were things that I thought mattered, and I could see them and I would care about them. I was a baseball player, so I cared about baseball. I wanted to be really good at baseball, and baseball was a big part of my life. Culturally, there's a shift, and I've seen it just over the last probably 5 to 10 years. There's this shift now of the things that matter to me as a teenager aren't just important; they're vital. I can't exist without them. And part of that is probably built around the increase in social media and instant analysis from friends and people and things of that sort. But the things that we have that we cling to as teenagers now, our life is built on them. And so when things get taken away, so take the sports example.
Yeah.
When things get taken away, there for any teenager that's ever played a sport, you take that sport away, some certain amounts of how they identify themselves gets pulled away. Now it can be, life altering. It can be crushing to pull it more. I really do believe more than say 15 years ago or 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And so that's part of the reason it's so important that they not only develop in their relationship with Christ, but they begin to really understand what their individual relationship with Christ looks like, that their identity comes from Jesus. It comes from God. It doesn't come from the world. Yeah. And it's a hard concept to flesh out. It really is, especially with current climate. I mean, the world today wants to tell you who you are. Yeah. And so there's difficulties there, but I just, in general, you see it. It's part of the reason, as parents of teenagers, our parents in our ministry, they see that their kids they're cranked up to 10 almost all the time. Right. They can't help it. Yeah. It's every grade is the most important grade in the world. Every interaction with their friend is the most important interaction in the world, because everything seems to matter so much more. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. Yeah. But it's the world we navigate through. Right. And so it's where relationship becomes so important. It's where community, along with the relationship, becomes important. It's where identifying yourself in Christ becomes so important. And it's not easy. There's no easy fixes with it. Yeah. And there's no perfect youth ministry to take care of it. Sure. But it's why, as parents, you can't just nudge towards church and nudge towards Jesus. Sometimes you just got to wrap your arm around them, hug them, and walk with them to church and walk with them to Jesus.
That's good.
Because they need it. Like we need it. Our teenagers need it.
And they need it. So many times people think of faith as a content issue. Right. Like, I need to know about the Bible. I need to know what God says in His Word about me and my identity. And all that's true. And we here at Bellevue and many other churches as well, they strive to produce and share the best content to help build faith in young people. But it's not just content. It's the content fleshed out in a community of relationships. And in a world where people are fractured socially, where they're so concerned about what people think of them in their Facebook posts or their Instagram posts or Snapchat, and they wrap their identity around these kind of very, very superficial, not insignificant, but superficial touch points. And it's more important than ever before for them to actually be with real people in a room, spending time with each other, working out relationships, bumping into each other and making one another mad, and then working through those relationships, which that happens a lot in youth ministry. Sure. You're constantly fighting cliques, and kids are learning how to be kind and generous with each other, and sometimes there's a lot of tripping in their learning. Yeah. And but that really doesn't happen except in a group setting, in an opportunity where you're actually there interacting. Yeah. Faith is so much more than just content.
And with students as well, there's an experiential element too. That in their faith, they have, most of the students, by the time they're a sophomore in high school, if they've been faithful church attenders, they have heard 75 to 80% of the messages I'm going to present to them. Yeah. Whether it's in a worship service in here, or it's in the youth department, or it's at a camp, or D-Now, or wherever, they've heard it. Yeah. So it becomes a thing where generationally, which I think all generations are like this, but theirs in particular, they get to a point where they need to experience something real. They need a real connection with Christ. I was actually just talking with a former student about this the other day, and a volunteer, that for our students, I try on every event, like big event that we have. We have 4 big events a year, from camp to D-Now, fall retreat, and mission trip. And at those big events, we try for each one to have one thing that they're going to remember that's not from a message, that's not from a small group time. We hope they're going to remember a lot from those things too.
Sure, yeah.
But we go out of our way to do one big experiential worship activity. And it may be something, at fall retreat that we have coming up. It may be a campfire, experience where they do something at the campfire that they're going to remember. We've done things where we've gotten in big groups, and I go around and encourage each kid one at a time. Or we do your daughter Abby, when she was in youth group. She was part of a hug train. We had a big hug train where they all just walk through and hug each other, and just stuff where they it becomes that faith is not just in a book. It's not just something they know about. Like you said, it's
tactile too.
Yeah, they feel it, they touch it, they experience it, and I like to try to set one of those in there, because there's so much other stuff that they're going to remember and experience outside of church.
Yeah.
If they can experience some stuff like that draws them closer to Christ, then I feel like we're doing an okay job with those events. So
that's one of the all of these reasons. I mean, kids need this experience, and we talked about before about how sometimes as staff members we're frustrated when families don't prioritize with church being at the top of the list, because we've so often seen the results. I know some families that we've ministered to over the years and been very active here, and their kids were super active in the children's ministry, and because of soccer or some other sport or a travel sport or something like that pulled them away so much, they ended up missing those 7 years. And we would try to capture something here and there, and but years after that, the college years and the early 20s of those kids, so much of the time you see the results of what was missed those 7 years.
Yeah.
And of course, that doesn't mean that if your kid's active in those 7 years that they're going to walk with God perfectly or anything like that.
Right.
But we have observed it. It greatly increases the probability that faith will be more fully orbed in a child's life.
One of the things I tell parents typically when we first bring their students into youth group, I used to get this question a lot from parents after usually about 2 years into youth group, and it was typically with the kids and parents who maybe weren't here quite as much. They would ask, why it seemed like I had favorites. Why do you have favorite kids? And I tried to always come up with a good answer for that that would encourage them, make them feel better. And honestly, I finally got to a point after about 10 years of doing that, I finally just started telling parents, I'm going to love every kid that comes in our youth group. They need to know they're cared for, they're prayed for.
Yeah.
But the kids that I'm going to get closest to, and the kids that our volunteers are going to get closest to, are going to be the ones that are here every time the doors are open.
I mean, it's just the way it works.
Just how it is.
It's true for any domain in life.
And so, for any of our parents, and I'm a youth parent. It's a new experience for me. You've gotten to do this a few times, but
several.
For me, this is.
I'm on kid 4.
My son's an 8th grader, and so I've just started to experience these things that I've told parents about for 20 years. One of the things that we have to realize as parents is that there are going to be a lot of things that our kids can be a part of. A lot of good things. A lot of, even some that are soul nurturing things. However, when it comes to church, when it comes to youth group, there really are no replacements for that. And so as parents, we all, and every one of us has to make this decision.
Yep.
You know, and I mean, staff are not beyond this either. We have to make these decisions.
Yep.
You have to decide, you know, where, you know, what is acceptable as a parent regarding your child's commitment and faithfulness to being part of this group. Because, you know, as a staff member, we can tell folks all day long, you know, we want you at church. We miss you. We want you here. And I mean, right now, you know, as a staff, we feel that. Like, there are people we genuinely miss.
Yes, yes.
But, you know, it goes beyond that. It's not just, you know, about our feelings. It's, I mean, I've been doing this a long time.
Right.
And what you said is absolutely true. You can see, by and large, the students that come through and are not just a part of youth group, but are actively engaged in youth group. You know, they're not just coming to Sunday morning. They want to be part of Wednesday night. They want to reach out to younger students. They want to invite their friends. They want to go to camp. By and large, those students, when they leave youth group, used to, you know, probably 20 years ago, when they would leave youth group, they didn't know what to do with themselves because the church looked so different from what they'd experienced in youth.
Yeah.
Now, what they experience and what I've seen, this trend, the shift, is you start to see students who they leave youth group, and if they've been engaged in youth group and engaged in the church, which is a whole thing, it's got to be a whole package, then what they may not.
In other words, they're also involved in some intergenerational aspects of the church. It's not just the kids ministry,
it's not just
youth ministry.
We're not just, you know, a group that exists separate from the church. We're a part of the church, and they're, you know, students who are engaged in worship services, who come to special events that are church-wide events, not just youth events.
Right.
Those students, when they leave youth group, go off to college, and college is a weird time.
Sure.
But regardless, they feel this tug on their heart that maybe they listen to, maybe they don't, but they feel this tug on their heart to re-engage with what has been a vital part of their life. And
they're
that's
much
the
more
church.
likely to do that often in college, right? That's what we really want. But even if not, that they've had that experience, and there's all kinds of things that can pull them back later.
Absolutely.
And,
it doesn't. There is no. Basically, I'll say it again. There is no substitute when it comes to teenagers, middle schoolers, and high schoolers. There is no substitute spiritually for church involvement, being involved and engaged in the youth group. There's just not. I mean, you know, personal devotion time is vitally important. You have to have it. But if there's no connection with the body, then
you're orphaned.
Then you're like a log that's been pulled out of a fire. Eventually it's going to go out. And so that's what we want for our students. We want every student every teenager that comes into this building, we want them somehow engaged with what we're doing in the youth group, and we want them engaged with what's going on with the rest of the church. That's what we want. That's our desire. And we want them to be as committed and faithful to it as they possibly can be.
Because we want them to have fun, but that's not the mission. The mission is we want to build champions for Christ.
Absolutely.
You know, we want people that are going to be able to capture the call of God in their life and walk in that calling. What are some things that are coming up here at Bellevue? Let's get real practical and timely here. What are some things that you guys are planning that are going to really invest in kids? From the weekday stuff all the way to you know, periodic events and things of that nature.
We just recently, just with the start of the school year, have shifted our life group hour, and it's something you and I've been talking about for a few years. Something I know that's been in your wheelhouse for a lot of years.
I've wanted it for a long time.
And you know, obviously we're hitting our little speed bumps along the way, but it's been a blessing. We now have duplicate life group hours, so
fully graded.
Yeah, we've got them. You know, we've got our middle schoolers separate from our high school, and they're split by gender, and so we've got, and I'll say this too, and this is no slight against any life group leaders I've had previously, because I've been very blessed.
Yeah, you really have.
But I've got just one of the greatest groups of teachers I've ever been able to work with.
Team you have, they're committed, they're passionate, they love the kids, and they're grounded.
Yes,
really grounded.
They love the Lord, they love the kids, and they're
they
a
love
lot
God's
of fun.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's, we do the Gospel Project as part of our life group curriculum. And so they come in each week. I do just a very brief lesson to kind of warm them up for what they're going to talk about. And then they go into their classes. They go through Scripture. They see how it connects to the gospel. They see how it connects to their life. And they talk about it.
I think we're in better shape when it comes to our curriculum. That really, over the long period of time, really the way we have it now at our church, we've changed it over the course of the last 2 years. We have from kindergarten all the way through, actually from preschool all the way through youth.
Yep.
We are building into these kids a knowledge of the Bible if they're consistently involved, and a knowledge of how the gospel relates to all the stories in Scripture.
How it all connects.
And it's exciting. It's an exciting time to rear your children in the context of Bellevue Church.
Yep. So we've just recently changed that. So anybody who watches this who doesn't have a youth in a life group, one of the kinks in the way things have been set up over the last several years has been that if an adult is in a life group on Sunday morning, based on when that group met, their child may or may not have been able to worship with them and go to life group.
But they can now.
And so we're hoping that that's going to really be an encouragement to our people, especially those elementary school kids as they move up into youth. So we've got that going. Our Wednesday nights, we do a program called Word on Wednesday. We come in, we have a student praise band. We have 2 or 3 students that play and sing and lead worship, and that's been great.
And it's a lot of fun. And one of the things that's often a time when we see, of course, you see people, they determine what they're going to do on their weekends, and whether they come to church or not. You need to be in church on Sunday. It's a Sabbath. You come to church. Sure. But on Wednesday, a lot of times that's where you hit a lot of your competition from the school system, sports practices, things of that nature. My son is involved in sports. He's getting very excited about sports now. He's also an 8th grader like your son. And he's got to practice almost every night. And we made the hard decision. It's hard. You have to have some backbone to say, if on Wednesday nights, if your practice isn't conducive to that, you will miss practice in order to. We'll make some, if a tournament's coming up the next day or something like that, we'll make some exceptions on occasion. But we have to talk about it, pray about it. But and right now we've had to email coach and basically say, hey, we're going to let him come, but he's going to be pulled 30 minutes before because he's got to get ready to go to church.
Sure.
And so he may be a little sweaty and stinky by the time he gets here, but we're going to make a priority of it.
Right.
And I so want our families to make that kind of commitment for their kids. But you got to have courage.
Sure.
You got to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And even risk maybe success in one domain in order to choose success in another more important domain.
Yeah. And the thing too I would add to that I think is maybe a misconception that some of our folks have year to year about the youth group.
Yeah.
We want the kids to come whenever.
Right.
Like we have, there's a tendency because I run late a lot for stuff, and so there's that tendency if you're the person who comes in late to the worship service and the only seats you see are in the very front, then you're going to go sit in the very front of your car and drive home. And we don't want you to do that, obviously. But with youth group, I think that filters down from parents sometimes to the kids of, well, you have to get home, you have to get a shower, you have to do this, you have to do that. And you don't.
You don't.
Come stinky. We're okay. We have middle school boys. Middle school boys are always stinky.
They smell bad even after the shower. Yeah.
So bring them. But that's one of those things. Like with the sports stuff, some of the coaches are very willing to work with families if they'll explain stuff. I know the sports that my son has played, they do an alternate schedule. They change it up week to week, and so that changes the times a little bit, makes things a little bit easier to work with. There's ways to do it, but yeah, I mean there's definitely challenges to that the parents have to be willing to figure out how they're going to do it. But our word on Wednesday, it's a great one for the students to get involved with because you have the worship time, and then we split up middle school and high school.
And it's youth-led worship too.
Yes,
the youth
actually
worship. Do it, and some of them very talented.
Oh, incredibly talented. We're very blessed right now. So, but they, we split them up middle school and high school for the rest of the night. So, the middle school, which there is a huge group of middle school students right now.
Yes.
A lot of them are 8th graders, but there's a bunch of middle schoolers.
Yeah.
They go to the gym for about 30 minutes. And Melinda Uday, who works in our office here, Melinda leads games for them, and so they have some high energy games, burn off a little energy, and
get their wiggles out.
Yeah, and so while they're doing that, the high schoolers are in the youth department with me, and I'm preaching, teaching, doing a lesson. Then they switch. Middle schoolers come in, and I can give the same lesson a little different for the middle school than I might for the high school.
Right. Oh yeah. Because they're different animals, like we talked about.
They are, but the same basic ideas. And so, and then high school's in the gym. And then when we finish each night, Wes Bueller, who leads our tech ministry here, he plays volleyball with any of the students that want to stay for some of the students will stay for an hour.
And I came last week to pick up my son, and I thought he wanted to go home early. Yeah. I thought, well, we didn't get home early at all because he got sucked into that and absolutely loved it. And there was quite a few that had stayed after.
There's a lot.
Until about 8:30.
And I tell them all the time that you don't have to be good at volleyball to play. In fact, it helps if you're not, because they all just get out there and have some fun. But that was something we started back before COVID and found that our students really loved it. Yeah. And Wes really loved it. It gave him an outlet for interacting with students. He has to stay behind the board a lot of times, or behind a camera, and so it freed him up to get in there and interact with them. And they love Wes, and so so anyway, that's our Wednesday night program. We've been doing that for a little while, and we'll continue to do that. But then we have some special events over the next several months that I know are going to be
cool
huge.
Stuff coming up.
Yep, our fall retreat, which honestly as far as my schedule goes each year, fall retreat's my favorite event of the year. I don't know if it's the temperature or location or what.
Some of the deepest spiritual things happen there
too. Oh, it's incredible. We have, we'll bring in a speaker. We actually this year are going to bring in our band. Our student band's going to lead it. So we'll see how they do. I know they're a little nervous, but they're excited.
Oh, they'll do good.
And the speaker we have is a youth pastor friend of mine from Elizabethtown who's coming over to preach. And we'll do small group times. Like, we put them into small groups. I pick students to lead small groups. They will discuss the messages and different things of that sort. We'll do some games and activities throughout the weekend. And then we'll do a big campfire. We'll have hot dogs and s'mores. But then after that, we do a very focused, kind of a Jesus-focused moment, like I was talking about before, the moments. And so we've done some pretty impacting things with that. Usually the biggest impact we have, the biggest part of that weekend, is the students will split into groups based on grade and gender. And the first couple of years we did this, it wasn't planned. They just did it on their own. Then we started saying, you know what, this is a good idea. Let's keep doing this. They just get together, and the only rule is they have to talk about things that matter. That's it. It's the only parameters we put on it. Talk about things that matter. And so typically, your 7th grade boys probably aren't going to do that for a very long time. They want to go play basketball or they want to go play. But you'll see your junior girls will talk for hours just about the relationship with Christ, or struggles that they're having, or relationships or anything. And it's not adult run. But inevitably, those students will share with us a lot of things that they talk about.
But it's in the context of a time where they've been thinking about Christ, applying God's Word, experiencing it. And so naturally in that conversation, they're doing that. So they're doing that for one another, with one another, working out their faith in real-life stuff that's going to impact them when they go home.
And, and the thing that I love about it, and this I tell parents this all the time. We want you as far as youth groups are concerned, we want you to come on Sunday mornings. We want you to come on Wednesday nights. For a lot of students, part of it's based on personality, part of it's just based on circumstances. A lot of students will be involved Sundays and Wednesdays and still not really feel connected to the group. I tell parents always, if you want your child to feel connected to the group, they've got to go with us to something. And fall retreat's the easiest one to do because it's Camp Schaefer. It's 30 minutes away. And they can come and I guarantee they'll have a fun time. And they're going to get to know people.
And they build those relationships that just last forever. With adults, with kids, they have this shared experience that bonds them.
And they come back with their group. They feel like they're part of the group. And so
we have another, and you always, every month there's another event, fun things. Underground, what is it? Persecuted Church or Underground
Church?
Underground Church. You do. Just recently, you did an event, a service event, Bellevueowensboro, where you sent kids all over the city to do service projects. It was incredible. But things are going on all the time, fellowships, fun stuff, spiritual things. But actually, you and I are going to be doing something together that we do every 2 years with our juniors and seniors, our 11th and 12th graders, called Prevailing Leadership. And that's something that I've done ever since 2012. Every 2 years, we gather them up. We go on a retreat to Jonathan Creek for a whole weekend. I don't preach that Sunday. I come and it's my opportunity to invest in them as their senior pastor and to be able to help bridge them into adulthood. And we really talk about what does it mean to have a prevailing faith that prevails past the youth ministry years and into college and career and life and family. And it's a time where we really kind of pronounce them as adults.
It is.
We say, hey, we're going to treat you as adults from here on out.
It's
powerful.
It's something, when I first got here, of course, you'd already done it several times. And, asked me to come and be a part of it. I wasn't really sure what it was. I was like, okay, I'll check this out and try to figure out what role I play in this. But what a big part of what we do, I want us to have a strong youth group. I want us to have a strong youth ministry. I want it to be dynamic and fun and impacting. But that impact, really, if we're doing it right, the impact doesn't just happen between those 7 years. The impact is something that lasts beyond. And so, that's where this becomes a huge thing. Because in a lot of ways, because it's juniors and seniors, in a lot of ways, this really is their sending off. Like you're sending them off. And obviously they're not leaving yet. It's beginning of the spring semester.
Some of them are within a few months. The seniors.
And so what I've seen in that event each year, number one, I think they get excited because it's their senior pastor that has invited them to be a part of it. And then the other thing that I see is that while they're there, while they're a part of it, it's like all of a sudden you start to see this shift of, I'm almost an adult. I'm this matters, because they're not treated like kids while they're there. We have fun, we play games, we laugh and stuff, but it's I wouldn't call it intense, but it is very focused. It's a very focused weekend. And so they get an opportunity to hear direct teaching from their pastor in a very practical, very comfortable way.
In a small setting. I mean, we've almost always, it's maybe 16 to 22 people, all together.
And just in a classroom, just talking and, staying engaged with one another. And so you see them, they start to realize, okay, my faith is not just here. My faith is here, and it's going to go with me when I go there. And so I think it's a great thing for any of our folks. And we'll have students as well. This has happened, I think, just about every time since I've been here. There'll be students as well who, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to be part of the youth group per se, but they come to that and they engage with the students, and I've actually had the opportunity to kind of build relationships with some of them beyond their time when they could have been in youth group. And so it's a really good, powerful event. It makes a big impact, and It's something I know our students
I
look
have a
forward
story actually this week. It wasn't this week, but it was in August. One of the young people and I had even baptized them when they were 14. One of the young people, they were at the Prevailing Leadership retreat and experience with us, and I knew her. I didn't know her well. I had been a part of her life at some key moments, but we didn't talk every week at church or anything like that. And she was fairly shy, but when she was going to go off to college, she was going to be moving out of state. And she came up to me on Sunday, gave me a hug and said, I'm moving to so-and-so, and just want you to know, thank you for your investment and all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted you to know why I won't be here. And I went, well, thank you for telling me and all that. Well, I talked to her grandmother just this week, last night, actually, and I said, give me her phone number, because what I found out, and this is a big thing we talk about, the grandmother called me to say she is actually looking for a church, like on her own. She's on her own. She doesn't have other believers around her right now. She's been going to church every Sunday while she's been gone. Thinks she's finding a church, and I said, "Oh, that is great. Give me your number. I just want to call and check on her and encourage her, and I'll keep on checking on her until she finally lands at a church." But she's doing it all on her own initiative, and I found that out last night, and just encouraged me. Ben, that was because she was being invested by you and all the leaders of the youth ministry. She was involved. She was coming, and then she was involved in events too that helped her spring forward into the future.
Right. That's great.
We have so many things. I tell you what, I so appreciate you. At the end of every one of these shows, I always like to do what I call a rapid fire session, where I asked a bunch of just somewhat trivial questions, but just to get to know you better in some other ways. And so I'm going to ask those. First of all, what is your favorite sport outside of baseball? Like, I know baseball is top. So if you take baseball off, what's next?
Yeah, basketball would
Basketball?
be. I'm a Kentucky boy.
Okay.
So it's ingrained in me that basketball's up there.
Yeah. Okay. Basketball. If you could spend a day with one Bible character from the Old Testament, so I'm limiting it.
All right.
Who would it be?
Oh man. Goodness gracious. Let's see. I can only pick one.
Just one.
Gosh. I guess I want to give like a profound one that, people be like, ooh, I don't even know exactly who that is, but I can't. I'm not going to do that. So honestly, it's the easy one, but probably David.
David, yeah.
I would love to. Actually, you know what? I won't say David. I'll say Saul.
Saul. Oh, wow. Wow, that'd be interesting.
Because, there was so much. I think that would be an interesting conversation to see. I'd like to get his thoughts on David.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. I love it. Okay, now what is your favorite family vacation spot?
Oh, Disney.
Disney.
We're a Disney family.
You're a Disney fan. I've never been to Disney.
Never
been to Disney.
No, it's funny. We used to, Becky and I, we used to really kind of tease people at our previous church who were just obsessed. They would go all the time.
Yeah,
and
we have a few of those here.
And we're like, those people are nuts. We're never going to do that. It's so expensive. It's so much. There's so much going on. And we went the first time as a family when Ben was little and Rachel was a baby. And when we went on the way back, we were leaving. We're driving home. And Becky's on her phone, just messing with her phone. I said, what's going on? She said, I'm just trying to plan our next trip. And so we try to go when we can. My kids are getting to a point where they aren't nearly as crazy about it as I am, but I love it. And that's not even for the rides. I like Disney.
The atmosphere.
Yep.
What is a place you'd like to visit that you've never been to before? Doesn't have to be family.
Yeah.
A family trip or anything, but just.
Well, going back to the baseball thing. One of two. I'd love to go to Cooperstown, New York, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is.
Okay.
And then my son brought this up the other day, and it's something I wanted to do when I was a kid, and I'm hoping he and I can do it sometime. I'd love to go to every Major League Baseball stadium
Oh wow!
See, like I could give some,
That's
you know,
a bucket list,
I could give a great churchy answer and say Israel, but this is Jerusalem. Yeah, I'd love to. No, I don't like flying all that much, so if I can drive there, I'm good to go.
Oh, okay.
But or anywhere on the West Coast. I've never been anywhere past Texas. That's as far west as I've ever been. So
yeah, I've flown over the Rockies, been in Colorado, and I've stopped in. Well, I've been to California.
Yeah.
And I guess Washington State too. So I guess I've been to several places, but it's a different world.
Yeah.
Different world. All right, dogs or cats?
I'm more of, well, I'm not an animal person at all.
Oh, okay.
My wife reminds me of that all the time.
You.
I had cats growing up because I was scared of dogs, and then we've tried to have a couple of dogs, but it just hadn't quite worked out. My wife's a huge dog person. She loves dogs. So I'll say cats, but it's probably whatever Becky tells me.
Okay.
If she ever wanted to get
something about you right there.
Whatever she wanted to get, that's what we would get, because happy wife, happy life.
All right, last question. Favorite restaurant to eat at that Owensboro, our city here, does not offer?
Oh, okay. That's actually an easy one. There's an Italian restaurant called Carrabba's.
Carrabba's.
It's a chain restaurant, but there's one in Louisville.
Okay.
And
I need to check it out.
It's a place Becky, like, she loved it. We actually, when we spent a summer with Campus Crusade for Christ in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and they had one. And she would go with her friends when she was mad about stuff or excited about stuff. And she fell in love with the place. And then when we started dating, she made me go a few times with her. And so actually the day we got engaged, the night we got engaged, I took her to Carrabba's before I went to propose.
Neat story.
Yeah, I love it. I love Carrabba's. It's great restaurant.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a good place to stop right there. Yep. Kyle, you have meant something to me ever since you were here almost 2 decades ago as an intern, and then an interim, and then you've especially meant so much to me and my family these last 6 years. You played a pivotal role in the last few youth ministry years of my youngest daughter, and you actually helped participate in her wedding last year, and were one of the ministers at her wedding. And then in addition to that, you are right now helping me parent. As a youth minister, you're helping me parent my youngest son, who's in 8th grade. And so love you, love serving with you, and look forward to many years to come.
Absolutely.